My daughter, Nora Tyler, has congenital heart disease. When her disease relapses once again, I scoop her into my arms and travel to the hospital on foot on a rainy night. By the time I reach the hospital, I accidentally see the note my husband, Lionel Tyler, has left for the doctor. I don't care what you do, be it dragging the time out to kill Nora or failing to save her life. No matter what, Nora isn't allowed to leave the hospital alive. Chloe's due date is almost here. I want you to pay more attention to her. Only her child has the right to become the first child of the Tyler family. I can only stare at the note with bloodshot eyes. At that time, the medical staff has already wheeled Nora out from the ER. A white sheet can be seen draping over her body. When I was still pregnant with Nora, Lionel had taken leave for 2 years just to take care of me. He truly viewed me as the apple of his eye back then. After I gave birth to Nora, he even purchased an island and named it after her. My favorite gardenias filled every inch of that island. The Lionel who once refused to take any other woman but me as his wife and had prioritized me more than his own life, is also the same man who has personally killed his own daughter just because his first love, Chloe Meyer, is pregnant. My heart has officially died. After leaving a divorce agreement behind, I go home and inherit my family business. Now, Lionel can never hope to reach me ever again. Rain poured in torrents. I held my daughter, Nora Tyler, tightly in my arms and sprinted toward the hospital. Not a single car stopped for us along the way. I could feel her body turning cold. Choking back sobs, I refused to let tears blur my vision and kept running even as my strength gave out. Help. Someone, please. Save my child. I screamed until my voice went hoarse. It wasn't until I burst into the emergency room with Nora in my arms that several doctors finally strolled over. After they wheeled her into the operating room, I caught a glimpse of a message on the computer screen, and my pupils constricted. Honey, how did Nora suddenly get so sick? Lionel Tyler appeared out of nowhere with genuine-looking anxiety written all over his face. Poor Nora inherited that congenital heart disease and suffered through so much misery since she was a baby. If she doesn't pull through this time, it might be a blessing for her. I turned and gawked at his conflicted expression in disbelief. Are you saying that you hope she doesn't make it? Of course not. You're overthinking it, he said, soothingly patting my back. I just don't want you to be sad. We can always have another child even if the worst-case scenario happens. I looked down and spotted a wristband in his pocket with the words, Chloe Meyer, printed on it. A mocking smile curled up at my lips. No, we won't. If anything happens to my Nora today, you and I will never have another child. As we spoke, the lights above the operating room went off, and Nora was peacefully wheeled out with a white sheet draped over her face. Completely devastated, I threw myself at her and raised my hand to touch her stiff body. We're sorry. She had stopped breathing by the time she arrived. Her condition was too severe, and we did everything we could, the doctor announced. I fought back sobs and gently fixed her hair. The pain in my heart felt unbearable, but I couldn't squeeze out a single tear. Go to sleep, good girl. Once you're asleep, it won't hurt anymore. Lionel sniffled and stepped closer to pull me back a little. Let's not hold up the hospital, Evie. We should have Nora cremated so she can rest in peace. Why are you in such a rush? Do you have a guilty conscience? I snapped my head back and fixed him with a deadly stare. I couldn't understand how someone could change this quickly. It wasn't until doctors wheeled Nora away, and I watched her fade into the distance, that I finally broke down in unbearable grief. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. Maybe I had used up all my strength rushing to the hospital, because after a few gut-wrenching wails, I blacked out. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying in a ward with an 4 drip finishing up in my arm. Everything that had happened that day flashed through my mind like scenes in a movie. Thinking of Nora, I instinctively scrambled out of bed and frantically rushed into the hallway to find her. That was when a familiar voice hit me like a blow. Just one more bite, babe. You're the center of my universe now, and so precious to me that I'm even afraid to touch you. Lionel's eyes were full of affection as he fed Chloe. They stayed in one of the hospital's luxury suites, surrounded by a handful of nannies taking care of them. Chloe was Lionel's first love. Years ago, she had abruptly fled the country and vanished without a trace on the night before their engagement. I took a deep breath and approached them. Chloe, the last time we met, I never thought I'd see you pregnant the next time we crossed paths. What does the baby's father do for a living? Both of them froze the moment they noticed me entering the suite. Chloe lowered her head, and her expression turned grim. To be honest, this baby was an accident, Evie. Abortion is illegal where I was living, so I had no choice but to keep it. That's right. She's too kind to get rid of the baby, Lionel explained and walked over to me. Her situation is unique right now, and I'm stepping in to take care of her. The doctor said you caught a severe chill and need plenty of rest. Chloe is due to give birth in a few days now, and since I've helped this far, I can't just leave her alone. I might not be able to manage everything all by myself, so why won't we stay here too for now? Go back to your ward and rest. I made you some soup, and I'll come over to keep you company shortly. I looked at them and almost laughed. Staying in the suite for even a second longer made me so nauseous that I could barely breathe. After I stepped out of the suite, Chloe casually spat a bone into a bowl in front of her and started whining softly. It feels like we're some dirty secret, Lionel. Do my baby and I have to live in shame forever, just because I love you? I don't want that. We can't hide this secret forever. There's no turning back for you ever since Nora died in that operating room, and if you still can't bring yourself to break things off with Evie, I don't want to make things difficult for you. Lionel intimately tapped her nose. What nonsense are you talking about? I'd do anything for you. Don't worry, Chloe. I'll take care of everything. I could even harm my own flesh and blood, so why would I think twice about an outsider who means nothing to me? An outsider who meant nothing to him? My heart felt like it was violently shredded by a branch of thorns, and the pain was so sharp that I could barely speak. Before Nora had her attack, she had excitedly clutched her report card and eagerly waited for Lionel to reward her by taking her out to dinner. Yet she had fought her illness until her last breath and still never got to see him again. The man she longed for the most was the same man who had plotted to take her life, all while looking forward to the birth of another baby. Upon returning to the ward, I contacted the most renowned lawyer to handle the divorce and hired a moving service to pack up all my belongings from the house and ship them away. After some hesitation, I finally decided to investigate how Lionel had set up the trap that took Nora's life. Later, Lionel and Chloe walked into my ward together. He carried over a bowl of chicken soup, while she presented a bouquet, acting all apologetic and repentful. Evie, you and Lionel have always been like family to me. I won't disrupt your lives again once the baby's born. Please forgive me for stepping out of line and borrowing your husband. Lionel mentioned that since you had a kid, you have a lot of experience. We're all going to be living together for a while, so I'll be counting on you to teach me all about it. I turned my head away to avoid looking at her. It didn't matter what sick show they wanted to put on in front of me, I just had to bide my time until next week, secure my share of the marital assets, and walk away. When Chloe noticed that I didn't reply, she reached out to place the flowers on my bedside table. But as she set them down, she gave a violent shove sideways. The mug of scalding hot water on the table tipped over and dumped onto my bare arm. A burning pain shot through my arm. My heart lurched, and I frantically rushed to the sink to shove my wound under a running tap. Lionel's anxious voice rang out behind me. Chloe, are you okay? How could you be so clumsy now that you're about to be a mother? What would I do if you burned yourself? As I quietly tended to my burn, a wave of sudden grievance welled up in me, and tears filled my eyes. The man who once cared about my every little detail could now ignore me as if I didn't exist. His eyes and heart only had room for someone else. That night, both rooms shared a single power grid, so all the heating was channeled into the next room. I wrapped myself tightly, but leaving my burned arm exposed to the air made it so cold that I could barely breathe. With no other choice, I opened my door to knock on Lionel and Chloe's, only to hear intimate voices coming from within the suite. It's just a few more days, so hang in there a little longer. I promise to make it up to you as much as I can after the baby's born. We can use every single move you like. Help me out for some relief, babe. I swear I can't leave you for the rest of my life. Intimate noises followed, while I stood frozen to the spot. Cold wind howled through the hallway, but I couldn't feel the slightest trace of the chill. Until then, I had clung to a sliver of wishful thinking, hoping that maybe Lionel just wanted to make amends to his first love, that Nora's death was just an accident, and that the relationship I prided myself on wasn't shattered. But reality felt like a brutal slap in my face. The signs had been there all along. After snapping out of the shock, I pressed my hands tightly over my ears and ran back to my ward. Right now, all I wanted was to escape to a place where they didn't exist. Once I pulled the blanket tightly over my head, endless grievance and misery flooded my heart. I could no longer force myself to maintain the calm facade and broke down, sobbing uncontrollably under the covers. I didn't know how I eventually fell asleep, but when I woke up again, the courier delivering my divorce papers brought in a box of valuables. I found this box of expensive items in your closet. You'll need to check them yourself since they're covered under a special insurance policy. I looked at the box before me and felt a strange urge to laugh. It was filled with evidence of how Lionel used to love me. Back when we were separated during a lockdown and couldn't contact each other by phone, he had handwritten over 1,000 letters to me just to set my heart at ease. When I had a fallout with my family and moved to Jangleton for college, he saved up his first pot of gold to buy me a house, giving me my first home in the city. That was also when he found the courage to propose to me. This is a wedding ring, right? You should keep it safe. Small items like this are impossible to find once they're lost. From the bottom of the box, the courier picked up a huge diamond ring and placed it in my hand. I stared at the ring for a moment before hurling it into a nearby trash can, feeling the weight lift off my chest. Throw everything away. I don't want any of it anymore. The courier looked at me in shock, paused for a second, then nodded. He kept looking back at me every few steps before dumping all the items into the trash can. What a waste, throwing all those treasures away, Chloe remarked and proudly walked up to me. So, did you enjoy listening in last night? We've toned it down now that I'm further along, Chloe added. You have no idea how much stamina Lionel used to have. We had to rush to the hospital so many times because he was way too aggressive in bed. Are you proud of yourself for shamelessly sleeping with another woman's husband? I countered and met her eyes dead on. No matter how incredible he is, he's just something I'm done playing with. How does it feel to get knocked up out of wedlock after feeding on my scraps? You. Chloe's face flushed and paled under my remark. She pouted before stepping closer to me, with a twisted expression on her face. And what about you? You couldn't even protect your own child. It must have felt awful to watch her die in your arms, right? When your precious daughter was sick and dying, and your husband wouldn't answer his phone. Guess what he was doing? My heart wrenched at the mention of Nora. Without hesitation, I threw all my strength into a hard slap across Chloe's face. If I find concrete evidence that both of you are associated with Nora's death, I swear I'll make you pay for it in blood. Just as my hand landed on her face, a massive force violently shoved me aside. Evie Bright. Who gave you the nerve to lay a land on her? If anything happened to her just now, you wouldn't even have enough lives to pay for it. Watching Lionel look so frantic over Chloe, I smirked mockingly and smacked the stack of divorce papers against his chest. Sign it and give your precious little son a proper title. As Lionel read the words on the paper, he impatiently frowned and stepped closer. Now is not the time to throw a tantrum, Evie. I don't have time to deal with your attitude. I'll give you whatever answer you want once I've handled everything. My child isn't even buried yet, while your mistress and her unborn baby are living in luxury. But you think I'm throwing a tantrum? I snapped. His frown deepened. Why is it so exhausting to talk to you, Evie? Maybe after everything's over, I should take you to a doctor. I seriously think something's wrong with you. I don't blame you for not understanding my situation, but you shouldn't take your anger out on innocent people. Don't blame me for getting ruthless if you keep up this unreasonable act. I shook my head, amused. What are you so full of yourself for, Lionel? I'll sue you for divorce even if you refuse to sign the papers. I don't want to have anything to do with you ever again. With that, I drove to a mall to buy what I needed and only returned late that evening to pack my bags for the airport. The moment I stepped through the door, I found that Lionel had cooked a massive spread of my favorite food. He dropped his usual irritable attitude and eagerly pulled me over to the dining table. I know I've neglected you lately and put you through so much pain, honey. None of us wanted what happened to Nora. Once I've dealt with everything, we'll focus on building a good life together again, okay? I swear to you, what's going on between Chloe and me isn't what you think. All this time, you're the only person I've ever wanted to spend the rest of my life with. Will you please trust me? Staring at the table full of food in front of me, I was briefly dazed. He knew what I wanted all along. The thought made me suck in a cold breath. Am I that easy to fool, or do you just think I'm pathetic, Lionel? As I spoke, Chloe walked in, pushing a cart loaded with expensive dishes, and shot me a smug look. Evie, Lionel ordered way too much food, and I seriously can't finish everything. Besides, I've developed a massive craving for sour food lately, and I can't get enough of it. Did you crave sour food as much when you were pregnant with Nora? No, she didn't, Lionel answered for me and rushed over to hold her. Just tell the nannies or call me if you need anything. What if you trip or hurt yourself? Oops, she gasped and quickly grabbed a piece of revealing lingerie on the food cart to hide it away, blushing shyly as she leaned against him. I shot them a look of disgust, grabbed my pre-packed suitcase, and prepared to leave. When Lionel noticed this, he stepped forward to block my path. Maybe it's best that you go on a trip to clear your head, honey. By the time you get back, I'll have all this mess cleared up, and we can start fresh. Oh, I do have to start fresh. I swerved past him and dragged my suitcase out. At the elevator, the young nurse doing her rounds hesitated for a few seconds before stepping close and whispering into my ear. The woman in the ward next to yours is your friend, right? She showed clear signs of a miscarriage this morning, but she's been hiding it from everyone. You might want to advise her to make proper arrangements if the baby truly isn't meant to be. I was secretly stunned. I hadn't expected karma to come for Chloe this quickly. Just as I accelerated out of the underground parking garage, Chloe suddenly appeared out of nowhere and threw herself onto my car. She was hit and sent flying several feet away, screaming in pain as blood pooled on the floor. The car would have run over her if I hadn't slammed on the brakes in time. My heart lurched. I quickly opened the door and got out of the car to check on her. Just then, Lionel rushed toward me. Without hesitation, he grabbed me by the collar and slapped me hard across the face. Are you courting death, Evie? Didn't I warn you not to touch her? If anything happens to her today, I'll make you pay with your life. Before I could say a single word in defense, he hurled me against the car behind me with such force that I coughed up blood. While I scrambled to get onto my feet, Lionel frantically scooped Chloe into his arms and rushed upstairs. My heart turned completely cold as I watched the way he treated another woman with a gentleness he had never shown me. A nearby nurse stepped over to check on me and give my hand a comforting squeeze. Don't worry. She already started bleeding upstairs. This area is a blind spot for cameras, but I know this has nothing to do with you. I nodded and spat out the remaining blood in my mouth. Numbly, I climbed into the driver's seat and signed the papers to inherit my family business. After taking a deep breath, I slammed my foot on the gas pedal and sped away. From this day onward, we shall never cross paths again, Lionel. Your downfall shall begin once you finish dealing with your precious lover. The flight to Capital City was quiet. Below, the city lights blurred into long, distorted streaks of yellow and white through the rain-streaked window. I sat in the first-class cabin, my burned arm bandaged and throbbing beneath my sleeve. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nora. I saw her small, pale hand clutching her report card, her voice asking when Daddy would come home to celebrate. Then, the image shifted to the white sheet draping over her small frame in the sterile hospital corridor. My phone buzzed on the armrest. It was a message from an unknown number, undoubtedly Lionel using a temporary line or a friend's phone, since I had blocked his primary contact. Evie, where did you go? Chloe is in the ICU. The doctor said the baby didn't make it. How could you be so heartless? You ran her down and just drove away. Come back and face what you did. I didn't reply. I turned the phone off, leaned my head against the cold glass, and let the silence consume me. When the plane landed at Capital City International Airport, a black sedan was already waiting on the tarmac. A middle-aged man in a dark, tailored suit stood by the door. His hair was touched with gray at the temples, his posture straight and formal. It was Arthur, my father's personal secretary. Seeing me, Arthur's eyes softened, though his expression remained disciplined. He bowed slightly. Welcome home, Miss Bright. The chairman is waiting for you at the estate. Thank you, Arthur, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I climbed into the back seat. The scent of expensive leather and cedar wood inside the car was familiar, a stark contrast to the small, sterile apartment I had shared with Lionel in Jangleton, where the smell of damp laundry and cheap disinfectant had always lingered. For 5 years, I had abandoned this luxury, believing that love and a simple life with Lionel were worth more than my family's empire. I had been foolish. The Bright estate was located on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by high stone walls and ancient ironwood trees. When the car stopped, the front doors of the mansion opened, and my father, Harrison Bright, stepped out. He looked older than when I had last seen him, his shoulders slightly curved, but his eyes were still sharp, like polished obsidian. I got out of the car. My father looked at my pale face, the bandage on my arm, and the hollow look in my eyes. He didn't ask about the divorce, nor did he ask about the child he had never been allowed to meet because of Lionel's pride. He simply extended his arms. You're home, Evie. That's all that matters. The warmth of his embrace broke something inside me. I didn't sob aloud, but the quiet tears soaked his shoulder. I'm sorry, Dad, I whispered. I was wrong. A mistake is just a lesson paid for in time, private, he said, using his old military nickname for me. You've paid your dues. Now, it's time to collect. That night, in my old bedroom, untouched, exactly as I had left it 5 years ago, I lay awake. My father had already arranged for the best medical team to look at my arm. The burn was severe, but with proper care, the scarring would be minimal. The physical pain was nothing compared to the cold resolve hardening in my chest. The next morning, I met my father in his study. The room was lined with dark mahogany bookshelves and smelled of black coffee and old paper. On his desk lay a thick blue folder. This is the current portfolio of the Bright Group's investments in Jangleton, Harrison said, pushing the folder toward me. Lionel's company, Tyler Industries, has been surviving on several indirect supply chains controlled by our subsidiaries. He thinks he's built his modest kingdom on his own merit. He has no idea that every contract he secured was because our partners wanted to keep the Bright family's estranged daughter from starving. I opened the folder. Tyler Industries was currently bidding for the South City waterfront development, a multi-billion-dollar project. If Lionel secured it, his company would transition from a mid-tier local firm to a national player. Who is the main investor for the South City project? I asked. We are, Harrison replied, a small, humorless smile touching his lips. Through our subsidiary, Vancorp Real Estate. The final decision on the bidding partner rests entirely with the newly appointed Chief Executive Officer of Vancorp. He slid a gold-plated pen across the desk. I have already signed the transition papers, Evie. You are the new CEO of Vancorp. What you do with Tyler Industries is entirely up to you. I picked up the pen. First, I want his divorce papers signed. Then, I want the truth about Nora. 2 days later, while I was reviewing Vancorp's financial statements in my new office at the Capital City headquarters, my assistant, Sarah, knocked on the door. Director Bright, there are 2 officers from the Jangleton Police Department downstairs. They claim they have a warrant for your questioning regarding an incident involving a vehicle and a pedestrian. I didn't look up from my laptop. Let them up, Sarah. And call Mr. Vance. Marcus Vance was the Bright Group's chief legal counsel, a man who had cleared corporate hurdles for my father for nearly 2 decades. By the time the 2 Jangleton detectives entered my office, Marcus was already standing beside my desk, his briefcase open, his expression perfectly neutral. The detectives looked uncomfortable. They were out of their jurisdiction, and the sheer scale of the Vancorp offices had clearly intimidated them. Mrs. Tyler, excuse me, Miss Bright, the lead detective, a man named Harris, said, clearing his throat. We are investigating a report filed by Lionel Tyler. He claims that on the night of the 14th, you intentionally struck Chloe Meyer with your vehicle in the underground parking lot of Jangleton General Hospital, causing her to lose her unborn child. That is a serious accusation, Detective. Marcus Vance intervened, his voice smooth and devoid of emotion. Do you have any physical evidence linking my client to an intentional assault? We have the victim's statement, and the statement of Mr. Tyler, who arrived at the scene immediately after, Detective Harris said. There is also a record of the vehicle belonging to Miss Bright leaving the scene in a hurry. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the detective. The parking lot has a blind spot where my car was parked, doesn't it? Yes, ma'am. The security cameras in that specific corridor were undergoing maintenance, Harris admitted. But my car was not, I said quietly. I opened a desk drawer, pulled out a small black USB drive, and slid it across the glass desk. This is the front and rear dashcam footage from my vehicle, recorded in high definition with night vision capabilities. It has been verified and time-stamped by an independent digital forensics firm. The original files have already been sent to the Jangleton District Attorney's office. The detective picked up the drive, looking surprised. If you watch the footage, I continued, you will see that I was driving at less than 10 miles per hour, heading toward the exit. Miss Meyer emerged from behind a concrete pillar and threw herself onto the hood of my stationary car. The impact was entirely fabricated. Furthermore, I have a signed deposition from Nurse Clara Shelby, who was on duty that night. She can testify that Miss Meyer was already showing clinical signs of a miscarriage several hours before the incident and had refused treatment to keep the pregnancy's termination a secret. The detectives exchanged a brief, telling glance. The case Lionel had tried to build against me was falling apart before it had even begun. There is one more thing, I added, my eyes narrowing slightly. I have filed a counter-report for filing a false police report, malicious prosecution, and physical assault. The physical assault charge is against Lionel Tyler, who struck me at the scene, causing internal bruising and a minor concussion, both of which are documented by the Capital City Medical Center. Marcus Vance smiled faintly. We will also be filing a civil suit for damages to Miss Bright's reputation. I suggest you take this drive back to Jangleton and advise Mr. Tyler to retain a very good defense lawyer. He is going to need one. After the detectives left, the office fell silent. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the gray skyline. Evie, Marcus said softly. The Jangleton police will drop the investigation against you by tonight. But what about the divorce? Lionel has refused to sign the papers his local counsel received. He thinks he still has leverage, I said. He thinks I'm the same woman who would tolerate his silence for the sake of our family. He's waiting for me to crawl back to Jangleton because he believes I have no resources left. Then we let him know who he is dealing with, Marcus replied. No, I said, turning around. Not yet. If we reveal the Bright family connection now, he will play the victim to the media, or worse, he will try to destroy the medical records regarding Nora to protect himself. We need those records, Marcus. We need the physical note he wrote to the doctor. I have already sent our private investigators to Jangleton General, Marcus said. But the hospital's administration is highly protective of its staff. Dar. Craig, the attending physician who handled your daughter's emergency, has suddenly gone on administrative leave. He's currently staying at a private villa in the hills outside Jangleton. A private villa? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Paid for with Lionel's money, no doubt. Find out who owns that villa. And find out how much Lionel paid him. In Jangleton, Lionel Tyler was sitting in his executive office, staring at a stack of unpaid bills and a notice from his bank. The South City waterfront development was his last hope. His company's cash flow had been severely strained over the past year. He had spent millions buying the luxury suite for Chloe, hiring private nurses, and purchasing expensive gifts to keep her satisfied. Now, with the loss of the baby and the mounting legal threats from Evie's sudden departure, he was desperate. Mr. Tyler, his secretary said, entering the office with a nervous expression. The representative from Vancorp Real Estate has arrived for the preliminary bidding review. But what? Lionel snapped, adjusting his tie. Did they bring the contract? No, sir. They said the new chief executive officer wants to meet you personally. They've invited you to the Vancorp regional office downtown. Lionel's chest swelled with a brief surge of pride. The new CEO wants to meet me. Personally. This meant Vancorp was serious about his proposal. Perhaps they had heard of his dedication, or perhaps his previous successes had finally caught the attention of the capital city elites. Get the car, Lionel ordered. And tell Chloe I might be late for dinner. Tell her we're about to secure the future of Tyler Industries. 10 minutes later, Lionel was sitting in the high-end conference room of Vancorp's Jangleton branch. The room was spacious, dominated by a large quartz table and a panoramic view of the Jangleton harbor. Lionel adjusted his cuffs, his mind racing with figures and projections. He was prepared to offer Vancorp a 10% discount on the initial development phase just to secure the partnership. The double doors of the conference room opened. Lionel stood up, a polished, professional smile plastered on his face. Welcome, Director. It's an honor to. His voice died in his throat. The woman walking into the room was dressed in a tailored charcoal gray pantsuit. Her hair, which had always been tied up in a simple, messy bun during her days as a housewife, was styled in a sharp, elegant bob. Her face was calm. Her expression cold and completely unreadable. Behind her walked Marcus Vance and 3 other attorneys in identical dark suits. Evie? Lionel gasped, his hands dropping to his sides. What are you doing here? How did you get in? I didn't answer. I walked to the head of the table and sat down in the leather executive chair. Marcus Vance remained standing beside me, opening a leather portfolio. Sit down, Mr. Tyler, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. The director does not have much time. Lionel stood frozen for a few seconds, his eyes darting between me and the attorneys. Director? Evie, what is this joke? You're the CEO of Vancorp? I am, I said, my voice flat. Though I believe my name on the corporate registry is Evie Bright. I only used the name Tyler to please a man who turned out to be a murderer. Have you lost your mind? Lionel's face flushed red, his professional demeanor fracturing. You think you can play dress up and pretend to run a company like this? I don't know how you managed to get into this room, but Vancorp is a multi-billion-dollar subsidiary of the Bright Group. You're just... Mr. Tyler, Marcus Vance interrupted, sliding a document across the quartz table. This is the official certification of appointment from the board of directors of the Bright Group. Miss Evie Bright is indeed the sole chief executive officer of Vancorp, with full authority over all regional investments, including the South City waterfront project. Lionel's eyes fell on the document. He saw the official seal of the Bright Group, a gold crest he had seen on national business news for years. He saw my signature, bold and clear, next to his own company's name under the section marked disqualification of bid. Disqualification? Lionel's voice trembled as he read the heading. You disqualified Tyler Industries? The Bright Group does not partner with companies whose leadership is under active criminal investigation, I said, leaning forward. Nor do we support businesses run by individuals with a history of domestic violence and moral turpitude. Evie, listen to me, Lionel said, his tone suddenly shifting from anger to a desperate, hurried pleading. He took a step toward the table, but one of the security guards stationed at the door stepped forward, his hand resting on his holster. Lionel stopped, his palms sweating. This is a misunderstanding. The police told me they had to drop the case against you because of some modified video. I know you're angry about Chloe, but that was an accident. She was distraught. She lost the baby, Evie. Our baby. Your baby with Chloe Meyer was already dead before she touched my car, Lionel. I said, my voice steady, though my heart burned with a quiet, icy rage. I have the medical reports. I have the nurse's testimony. You tried to frame me for murder to cover up the fact that your mistress had already suffered a miscarriage due to her own negligence. Lionel's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. And now, I said, rising from my chair, let's talk about Nora. The mention of Nora's name seemed to drain the remaining color from Lionel's face. He took a step back, his eyes darting toward the door as if looking for an escape. Nora's death was a tragedy, Lionel stammered, his voice rising in pitch. She had congenital heart disease, Evie. You knew that. The doctor said her condition was too severe. Why are you bringing this up now? Are you trying to blame me for her illness? I am blaming you for her death, I said. I nodded to Marcus, who pulled another document from his portfolio. It was a copy of a bank transfer record from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. On the night Nora was admitted to the emergency room, Marcus Vance read aloud. A sum of $500,000 was transferred from a shell company. Registered under your name, Tyler Holdings, to a private account belonging to Dr. Craig's sister-in-law. 2 hours later, Nora was pronounced dead. That's a business transaction. Lionel cried, his forehead bead with sweat. I was investing in a medical research project Dr. Craig was running. It had nothing to do with Nora. Then how do you explain this? I asked, pulling a clear plastic evidence bag from my purse. Inside the bag was a crumpled piece of yellow notepad paper. It was the physical note I had managed to grab from the doctor's desk during the chaos of that rainy night, before I blacked out. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Lionel's. Sharp, slanted print. I don't care what you do, be it dragging the time out to kill Nora or failing to save her life. No matter what, Nora isn't allowed to leave the hospital alive. How did you get that? Lionel's voice sank to a whisper. His knees seemed to buckle slightly, and he had to hold on to the edge of the conference table to stay upright. You thought the doctor destroyed it, I said, my voice cold and hollow. But Dr. Craig was smart. He kept it as blackmail material, in case you ever decided to stop paying him. He left it in his desk drawer that night, and I found it while you were busy comforting your mistress in the next room. Evie, please. Lionel's arrogance was entirely gone. He looked like a cornered animal, his eyes wide with fear. I didn't mean it. I was confused. Chloe was putting pressure on me. She said if Nora lived, she would never be able to raise her child as the true heir of the Tyler family. She threatened to leave me again, Evie. I loved you. I loved Nora, but I was out of my mind. You loved yourself, Lionel, I said, looking at him with nothing but disgust. You loved the idea of having a perfect family, a perfect heir, and a perfect mistress, all while keeping me as a quiet, compliant shadow in your house. You killed my daughter because she was inconvenient to your ambition. I can change. Lionel scrambled forward, dropping to his knees. He tried to reach for the hem of my pantsuit, but the security guards quickly grabbed his arms, pinning him to the floor. Evie, we can start over. I'll divorce Chloe. I'll kick her out of the house. I'll give you everything. Just don't do this to me. If Vancourt pulls out, my company will go bankrupt by the end of the month. I looked down at him, feeling no satisfaction, no joy, only a deep, clean sense of finality. The bidding is over, Mr. Tyler, I said. And so is your freedom. I turned my back on him and walked toward the double doors. Behind me, Lionel's screams of desperation echoed through the quiet conference room. Evie. You can't do this. I built that company. Evie. The arrest of Lionel Tyler did not happen in the quiet confines of a corporate office. It happened on a rainy Tuesday morning, outside the luxury apartment building where he and Chloe Meyer had been living. The media, tipped off by an anonymous source within the Bright Group, had already gathered outside the gates. When 3 police cruisers pulled up, sirens flashing, the reporters swarmed the entrance. Lionel was led out in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair messy. Behind him, Chloe was screaming at the officers, her face pale and distorted with rage. You can't arrest him. This is a mistake. He didn't do anything. She shrieked, clutching her stomach as if still trying to play the part of a fragile, grieving mother. It was his wife. Evie Bright did this. She's trying to destroy us. A reporter thrust a microphone in her face. Miss Meyer, is it true that you fabricated your miscarriage to frame Miss Bright? Is it true that Mr. Tyler paid off the attending physician to neglect his own daughter? No. That's a lie. Chloe screamed, trying to block the camera with her handbag. We loved Nora. We did everything we could. But the evidence was already public. The Jangleton District Attorney's Office had released a statement confirming that Dr. Craig had been arrested at his villa and had fully confessed to medical malpractice and receiving bribes. He had turned over state's evidence, including digital messages from Lionel, instructing him to make sure the child doesn't wake up. As the police car carrying Lionel drove away, I watched from the window of a black sedan parked across the street. My father sat beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder. It's over, Evie. The trial will be swift. The evidence is airtight. I know, I said, my eyes fixed on the rain sliding down the window panes. But it won't bring Nora back. No, my father said softly. But she can rest now. She knows her mother didn't abandon her. I closed my eyes, letting the quiet hum of the car engine soothe my exhausted mind. The 5 years I had spent with Lionel felt like a long, dark dream from which I had finally awakened. The love I had once felt for him was entirely gone, replaced by a cool, clean space where my daughter's memory would live on. With Lionel behind bars and Tyler Industries entering liquidation, Chloe Meyer's world collapsed within a matter of weeks. The luxury apartment she had demanded Lionel buy for her was seized by the creditors. Her credit cards were cancelled, and the nannies and private nurses she had hired vanished overnight when their checks bounced. Desperate, she tried to contact me. She showed up at the Vancorp headquarters in Capital City, demanding to see the CEO. When Sarah informed me that Chloe was downstairs, I decided to let her up. I wanted to see the woman who had helped destroy my family, to see what was left of her when the money and the lies were stripped away. When Chloe entered my office, she didn't look like the proud, elegant mistress she had been in the hospital. Her clothes were cheap, her hair dry and unstyled. Her eyes were red, surrounded by dark circles of exhaustion. "Evie," she said, her voice trembling as she approached my desk. "You have to help me." I didn't answer. I sat in my chair, looking at her with a calm, neutral expression. "Lionel is going to prison," Chloe said, tears streaming down her face. "They're saying he could get life. And they're trying to implicate me as an accomplice. They're saying I knew about the bribe to Dr. Craig. But I didn't, Evie. I swear. I didn't. Lionel did that on his own. He was obsessed with giving me a child. With making sure our baby was the firstborn. I didn't know he would kill Nora. To do it. You knew," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You were the one who told him that. As long as Nora was alive, your child would always be second best. You were the one who threatened to leave him if he didn't secure the Tyler family estate for your baby. You held the knife, Chloe. Lionel just drove it in." "Please," Chloe sobbed, dropping to her knees in front of my desk. "I have nothing left. The banks took everything. I don't even have enough money for food. If you help me clear my name, I'll leave the country. I'll never come back. I'll never look at Lionel again." I looked down at her, remembering how she had smirked at me in the hospital corridor, how she had proudly shown off her pregnant stomach and bragged about how Lionel had never been able to leave her. "Do you remember what you said to me the day Nora died?" I asked. "You asked me how it felt to watch my daughter die in my arms. You asked me if I enjoyed listening to you and Lionel in the next room." Chloe's face went pale, her lips trembling. I was out of my mind. I was jealous, Evie. Lionel always talked about how much he loved you, how he could never forget you even when he was with me. I wanted to hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Your apologies are 5 years too late, Chloe, I said, rising from my chair. And they're meant for a woman who no longer exists. I looked at Sarah, who was standing by the door. "Call security. And call the police. Miss Meyer is currently trespassing on private property, and I believe there is an active warrant for her arrest regarding her involvement in the fraud case against Lionel Tyler." "Evie. No. You can't do this." Chloe screamed as 2 security guards entered the office and grabbed her by the arms. "You're a monster. You're destroying everyone." "No," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet office as she was dragged away. "I am simply cleaning up the mess you made." The trial of Lionel Tyler and Chloe Meyer began in the autumn. The Jangleton courthouse was packed with reporters, local business leaders, and curious onlookers who had followed the dramatic fall of the Tyler family. I sat in the front row of the gallery, dressed in a simple black wool coat. Beside me sat Marcus Vance and my father. Lionel sat at the defense table, his head bowed, his eyes staring at his hands. He looked 10 years older, his face thin, his skin a dull, lifeless gray. He had lost his company, his reputation, and his freedom. Chloe sat a few feet away, her defense lawyer trying to paint her as an innocent victim of Lionel's manipulation. But the prosecution's case was devastating. They presented the digital records recovered from Lionel's phone, showing months of messages between him and Chloe discussing Nora's elimination. "If Nora is gone, Evie will have no reason to stay," Chloe had written in one message, dated 3 weeks before Nora's death. "And the Tyler estate will belong to our son. You have to make a choice, Lionel. Me, or them." Lionel's reply had been simple, "I'll handle it. Don't worry, babe. The doctor will make sure it looks like a natural relapse." When the prosecution read the messages aloud, a collective gasp ran through the courtroom. Several jurors looked at Lionel with open disgust. The prosecution then called Dr. Craig to the stand. The doctor, dressed in a prison orange jumpsuit, looked broken. He testified in detail about how Lionel had approached him, how they had planned the delay in Nora's treatment, and how Lionel had written the physical note to confirm the arrangement when he became paranoid that the doctor might back out. "He told me the child was a burden," Dr. Craig said, his voice cracking. He said her illness was draining his resources, and that he wanted a healthy heir. With his new wife. He offered me $500,000. I was in debt, and I made a terrible mistake. I closed my eyes, my hands clenching into fists inside my pockets. The pain of hearing the details of my daughter's final moments was almost unbearable, but I forced myself to stay calm, to bear witness to the end of the monsters who had killed her. When the verdict was read, there was no surprise. Lionel Tyler was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and bribery. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Chloe Meyer was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and malicious prosecution. She was sentenced to 15 years in a maximum security prison. As the bailiffs led Lionel away, he turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were full of a strange, empty desperation. He opened his mouth, as if trying to say my name, but the guards quickly pushed him through the side door, and he vanished from my sight forever. 3 months after the trial, the island Lionel had purchased and named after Nora was officially put up for auction by the bankruptcy court. I bought it. I didn't buy it to keep it, or to preserve the memory of the man who had built it. I bought it to set it free. On a cold, clear spring morning, I stood on the shore of the island. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt water and the faint, sweet perfume of the gardenias that filled every corner of the land. My father stood beside me, his coat collar turned up against the wind. What do you want to do with the island, Evie? I've already signed the papers to donate it to the capital city children's hospital, I said, looking out at the calm blue water. They're going to build a pediatric recovery center here. A place where children with heart disease can come to rest, to play, and to heal in the fresh air. That's a beautiful idea, Harrison said, his hand resting on my shoulder. Nora would have loved it. Yes, I whispered. She would. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, silver locket. Inside was a picture of Nora, smiling her bright, gap-toothed smile, her eyes full of the innocence and joy she had kept until her final days. I opened the locket, took a deep breath, and let her go. The wind caught the faint white petals of a gardenia I had held in my hand, carrying them out over the water, where they floated silently before disappearing into the endless blue. I turned my back on the shore and walked toward the waiting boat. The pain of losing Nora would never fully leave me. It was a scar I would carry for the rest of my life, a quiet ache that would return with every rainy night. But the shadow of the past had finally lifted. I had my father, I had my family's legacy, and I had the strength to build a future where my daughter's name would be remembered not for the tragedy of her death, but for the hope she would bring to others. As the boat pulled away from the island, the scent of gardenias lingered in the air, sweet and silent, like a promise kept.